Season 1 of Hot D has drama, betrayals, and dragons. But above all, House of the Dragon is an incursion into the politics of Westeros at the height of Targaryen power. George R.R. Martin's world building is unmatched, and Season 1 draws many parallels with historic and contemporary real-world politics. So today, we'll break down some plot lines and compare them with real-world events. I divided this video in 4 segments. The first is historic inspiration for Hot D. It's no secret that George R.R. Martin is a huge history nerd. The story of A Song of Ice and Fire was inspired in part by the Wars of the Roses. Similarly, House of the Dragon is also inspired by a real-world event, the Anarchy. This medieval conflict took place between 1135 and 1154 and saw 2 factions fight for the English throne. King Henry I and Matilda of Scotland had only one daughter, also named Matilda, and one son named William. William's birth meant that the king had a male heir to secure his succession. But tragedy struck, and both Matilda of Scotland and William died. So the king decided to name his daughter, Matilda, his heir, an unprecedented move in medieval England. Henry had the establishment swear an oath to Matilda to gather support for her claim. It's easy to draw parallels with episode 1 of House of the Dragon. King Viserys and Aemma have only one daughter named Rhaenyra, and one son on the way. The birth of a boy would mean a male heir to secure the king's succession. But tragedy struck and both Aemma and the boy die. So the king decides to name his daughter Rhaenyra his heir, an unprecedented move in the realm. Viserys had the establishment swear an oath to Rhaenyra to gather support for her claim. But there's more. When King Henry I died, Matilda's claim was aggressively challenged by Etienne de Blois, the son of Henry's sister, and the establishment rejected their oath to Matilda and made Etienne king. War ensued when Matilda gathered support and raised an army to invade England. The plot lines for episode 9 and 10 mirror this event. When King Viserys dies, Rhaenyra's claim was aggressively challenged by Aegon II, the son of Viserys' second marriage to Alicent Hightower, and the establishment rejected their oath to Rhaenyra to make Aegon king. War is coming as Rhaenyra gathers support and raises an army. As you can see, the show draws inspiration from this historic event, and our second segment also builds on historic context. The politics of marriage. I dedicated a whole video to the succession crisis caused by Viserys after marrying Alicent Hightower. In today's video, we'll explore the political dimension of marriage and how it relates to the real world. Today, most world leaders marry for love. But for most of history, royal families would marry for power. Marriage could reinforce old alliances, forge new ones, or even end feuds, much like a treaty between 2 kingdoms. Because marriage was a political tool, it would often be the subject of tough negotiations, especially because their outcome could be highly consequential. For instance, Isabelle de Valois was the daughter of Charles VI de France. In 1396, at 7 years old, she was married off to King Richard II, a 29-year-old man, for the purpose of peace between France and England following the 100 Years' War. The marriage was not consummated until Isabelle turned 12. In House of the Dragon, marriage is also used as a political tool. When Aemma dies, we see powerful houses like the Valerians and the Hightowers lobbying the newly single king. They all hope Viserys will marry their daughter and produce a male heir who would sit on the Iron Throne. And one awkward scene draws interesting parallels with Isabelle de Valois. The Velaryons present their 12-year-old daughter Laena as a bride offer to King Viserys. They hope this marriage would reinforce their strong alliance with the Targaryens. Laena's age is obviously not a problem for the Velaryons, much like Isabelle de Valois. And similarly to Isabelle's real-life story, Laena is not expected to bed the king until she turns 14. Marriage is a recurring theme throughout the first season. For example, Rhaenyra's marriage to Laenor reinforces the alliance between the Targaryens and the Velaryons. Rhaenyra proposes a marriage between her son Jacaerys and Alicent's daughter Helaena to end the feud between the Greens and the Blacks, but Alicent refuses. And of course, Viserys married Alicent Hightower. My previous video explores why this was the worst decision for the Targaryens. But we cannot close this chapter without talking about consanguineous marriages. George R.R. Martin's world is full of them. For example, Rhaenyra marries her uncle Daemon, and they have children together. Aegon marries his sister Helaena, and they also have children together. If this sounds unique to Westeros, brace yourself because it's not. Throughout history, European royal families would engage in this behavior, and it caused severe inbreeding. There's no better example than the Habsburgs. For centuries, the Habsburgs were a prominent royal dynasty in Europe. They are also known for the Habsburg jaw, a physical trait attributed to generations of serial inbreeding. The Habsburg married their blood relative to keep power within the family. Similarly, characters in House of the Dragon engage in consanguineous marriages for power. Rhaenyra marries her uncle Daemon to legitimize her claim to the throne. Daemon is a Targaryen, he's the brother of the king, and both have Velaryon children from previous marriages. Likewise, Aegon marries his sister Helaena to strengthen his claim to the throne. It also ensures that Aegon's children will have silver hair, which reinforces his legitimacy in comparison with Rhaenyra's children. The politics of marriage highlights the importance of legitimacy for the Greens and the Blacks, especially in times of war. And this brings us to our next segment: soft and hard power dynamics. You might have heard of soft and hard power in the context of global affairs, and it is the best way to understand it. Soft power uses persuasion and desirability to influence behaviors without resorting to force. Sources of soft power include culture, values, political engagement, public sentiment, and more. Many observers of world affairs will tell you that the United States has a lot of soft power. It influences the world through its cultural exports such as movies, music, sports, and education. On the contrary, China identified its lack of soft power as a problem for its position on the world stage, and is said to invest billions to boost its international reputation. So, soft power is important, and it plays a role in House of the Dragon. Some players of the Game of Thrones have more soft power than others. Think of Odo and Larys. Both have shown their willingness to resort to force at times, but most often, they don't need to. Their words and influence suffice to convince others to do as they want. Another example of soft power is the church. Through the faith of the Seven, the clergy influences the people of Westeros and is often used as a conduit for the powerful. We'll touch on that later in this video. On the contrary, Sir Criston Cole has zero soft power. Looking very hot does not qualify. Instead, his power derives from his ability to fight and his violent nature. It's what we call hard power. In world affairs, hard power uses force, military tactics, payment, and economic sanctions to influence behaviors. Take, for example, Russia's war in Ukraine. It's a brutal example of hard power through military force. And the economic sanctions imposed by the West on Russia is also an example of hard power. In House of the Dragon, hard power is wielded in similar ways. The first is obvious. Dragons are weapons of mass destruction, and they're likely to be used in the conflict between the Greens and the Blacks, like military power in real life. The Valerians wield additional hard power. In the finale, Rhaenyra hopes the Valerians will support her claim. She says, "No port on the narrow sea would dare to make an enemy of the Valerian fleet." Furthermore, in episode 10, Corlys Velaryon suggests they should cut off all seaborne travel and trade towards King's Landing, like economic sanctions in real life. This is likely to cause trouble for the Greens in the next season. Economic sanctions have an impact on the treasury needed to fund war efforts, and can impact the livelihoods of regular folks in King's Landing, and therefore diminish public support for the Greens. But hard power can be destructive and should be used with care. For instance, Rhaenyra is reluctant to use dragons. She says, "When dragons flew to war, everything burned." She does not want to rule over a burned down empire. By the way, I have a House of the Dragon playlist if you want to save it to your library. That's where I post all my Hotd content, including shorts. The weaponization of religion. Throughout history, religion has been used by the powerful to legitimize their rule through a doctrine called the divine right of kings. In other words, the king's right to rule derives from divine authority. But the use of religion in politics is not a thing of the past, and it's not exclusive to absolute monarchies. For example, this year, the campaign for Governor Ron DeSantis cut an ad about how God chose a warrior for Florida.
"And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, 'I need a protector.' So God made a fighter."
Modern authoritarian leaders also use religion to build power. In Russia, for example, 70% of the population identifies with the Orthodox Church, and Putin often uses the social conservative values of the Church to justify laws against free speech, LGBTQ+ rights, and other human rights violations. In Hot D, religion was present throughout Season 1 and is likely to play a role in Season 2. The Hightowers are devoted to the faith of the Seven, whereas the Targaryens publicly align with the Church but secretly consider themselves closer to gods than men. The final 3 episodes highlight the role that religion plays in legitimizing Aegon's claim to the throne. In Episode 8, the Greens exert a growing influence on King Viserys' court, and coincidentally, they wrap themselves in religious symbols. At the Red Keep, Targaryen symbols were replaced with religious ones, and Alicent is seen wearing ostentatious religious signs. Yes, the Greens are believers, but their increased alignment with the Church was likely a strategy to legitimize their imminent move for the throne. In fact, Otto confirms this in the last episode. He tells Rhaenyra that Aegon was anointed by a septum of the faith before the eyes of thousands. Every symbol of legitimacy belongs to him. Cozying up with the Church may be helpful to legitimize Aegon's power, but it could backfire too. We saw this in Game of Thrones with Cersei. And history points to many instances when the authority of the king was challenged by the Church, in part because the clergy claimed to be the subject of canon law, not king's law. These are just some examples of how House of the Dragon draws inspiration from real-life politics. In many ways, Hot D is a fantasy-based political intrigue, and that's why I like it so much. You know I love to hear your feedback, so let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you found this video entertaining, subscribe to the channel. It takes forever to make these, so good karma is appreciated. And thank you so much for watching the past videos. I'm very happy that my content found an audience and that we can interact together. I love to read your theories, your comments, your criticism, your positive feedback, and I hope to see you again on the channel very, very soon. Bye.